Welcome to Shades of You podcast, where we're going to be talking about life, love, and the lessons we've learned.
And how we use our different perspectives to shape our relationship as an interracial couple and a blended family.
What up, family? I'm Kerry.
And I'm Kat.
And today we're going to be talking about grief.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about how to cope with grief, our experiences with grief.
Yeah.
And maybe we can help you guys out. And today's episode is kind of inspired by the big loss of Kobe Bryant and Gianna Bryant. So we are wearing our Lakers gear today. We went downtown to the Staples Center and paid our respects.
Yeah, we went and we took our picture. There's a mural down from where we stay at that we wanted to take pictures and sign the wall and just, like you said, pay our respects. So it's grief is a challenging thing. It's a very interesting thing. So we're going to come from the perspective of one thing we want to preface is we're not the gurus. We're not any kind of therapists, and we're not going to be able to analyze you and tell you exactly how to deal with grief. We're just going to offer some different advice, some things that we've done some research on.
Things that we've experienced as well.
Yeah. I mean, we have, even we're talking about grief prior to the passing of Kobe and Gianna and those that were on the helicopter, just our own personal experiences, my military background and having to deal with grief, your personal experience, even the loss of your own brother.
Right.
And how those challenges and how I can even just give a little insight when we first started dating and got married, and you were talking about the passing of your brother and how you handled it and how you dealt with it was a little foreign to me. So I know that there was, for lack of better words, some tension because I never had experienced grief or handled it in that particular way. So if it was so foreign to me that I was judging you. I'm not going to lie. I was just judging you. I was like, why? Like, how are you handling like that? Like we were taught just because in the military, you have to learn how to displace your emotions. It's almost like we were robotic. In the way that we dealt with grief and the way we dealt with emotions. Because literally when you're out on patrol, this is when I was deployed going to war, your life is on the line. So you had to learn how to almost, for lack of a better word, flip a switch. So that way that you weren't jeopardizing your life or those other soldiers around you. So it was one of those things where it was almost like you became numb to what was going on. So that was something when we first started dating and we got married, and really a lot of different kind of conversations of us talking about grief and how you dealt with it and how I dealt with it. So you want to chime in?
Would you say because of your experience with coping with death in that environment that you didn't actually cope with it? You just,
No, we didn't. I mean, honestly, so my very first time that we lost soldiers, it shocked me because seeing a human life leave right in front of you, seeing people cry out and they're dying and they want you to for lack of better words, save their life or put them back together. It was something I had never witnessed. I've seen movies. I've heard people talk about death. Even when we were training, some of you guys are not going to make it back. We've heard all of those different levels of rhetoric. Mm-hmm. So seeing that in person, it was shocking. It totally caught me off guard. And I remember a first sergeant specifically was Sergeant Marshall, stand down, because I was angry. I was like, why are we going to continue mission and we just lost 8 guys? I was having an episode, and he never explained. So in the military, especially in the Army, there is no explanation. It's just if I outrank you, do what I tell you to do. So it was Staff Sergeant, stand down, Charlie Mike, which means continue mission. And it was I had to really understand, me taking time to try to process in that moment was going to jeopardize everybody's life because I was literally I could not handle it. Mm. So I didn't have a choice to learn. It was you had to flip that switch and be we're almost disposable. So I had to get to the process of a way of thinking okay, I can't focus in on the emotional aspect.
You couldn't allow yourself to fully
You didn't have
grieve.
a choice. You really didn't have a choice because your decisions of how you handle it could jeopardize other people's lives. So you had to learn to detach quickly.
probably why a lot of soldiers struggle with PTSD, which is
Exactly.
an episode we'll get into in the future because it's something that you deal with.
Right. So, I mean, we even talk about this. I was almost robotic in my mannerisms and how I dealt with death. Even when my father passed, it was just, I didn't feel anything until the actual ceremony.
Yeah.
I was like, you asked me, like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm good. Like, I didn't have any level of emotion until the actual day
Right.
of the funeral. And in my opinion, that's not how you're supposed to feel. But I realize and I recognize that, knowing that, so much of my life in the military had shaped my mannerisms and my opinions and just the way that I function.
Well, it was a coping mechanism.
Yeah, of course.
In order to continue
because
what you had to do.
Those situations didn't allow you to really sit and allow yourself to be, for lack of better words, to grieve properly. Mm-hmm. You didn't have that choice. We couldn't sit around and grieve. We talked to each other after the missions were over, but you had your own small cliques or groups that you talked to. But every day it was you got to go out on patrol for 10 hours, 6 hours, whatever it was. You got to go kicking doors. You got to do raids. I was, for those that are listening that don't know the backstory, I was in the military for 8 years. I was in a highly deployable combat unit. I was in a specialized team where we did a lot of combat missions, where we did a lot of raids. We did a lot of air insertions. I've done some work with special forces, with Navy SEALs, and I've been attached to Rangers. So I saw a lot of stuff. I was behind the enemy lines that I had to experience discharging my weapon, engaging with the enemy, trying to save lives, seeing guys die. So I've been on the ground. I'm not, one of these people that like to talk about it all the time, but I feel like there should be a little bit of backstory so the way you have a better understanding of me, sharing how I dealt with grief for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And we can even talk about the passing of Kobe. So initially, when we heard about Kobe passing, I was at church. I play guitar. I'm a professional guitarist for those that are listening that do not know. And my brother called me, which never happened. So when he called me, I knew something was happening. I didn't know if it had something to do with my mother or something to do with a sibling. I knew it was something.
And so it was before 11. So it was really short, really. I mean, it was 10 something. So
it was
shortly
10 something.
after
So I didn't
happened.
understand. I'm like, why are you calling me? Because that never happens. I just answered the phone, but I couldn't speak. So he heard that I was playing. So he texted me and said that Kobe had passed. And I was like, bro, listen, it's too early in the morning to be playing games. Because he and I, we horse around, not about death. We just horse around about a lot of nonsense. So I thought he was just being stupid, being crazy. He thought I thought he thought that this was a little funny, let me mess with Kerry because I know he's a huge Kobe fan. Let me just mess with him. And he was like, nah, bro, no, he passed away. He died in a helicopter crash. He was like, I wanted to be the first to tell you because I know that you hearing this, I know you're a huge Kobe fan and I want you to read it somewhere and you didn't have anybody to be there to lean on. Yeah. And so when I saw it, I was so taken aback. I was in shock. I'm pretty sure everybody else that had to deal with it. And I didn't understand how this could happen to Kobe. For a minute, for lack of better words, I thought he was a superhero that was almost invincible. He was somebody that I grew up with, somebody that I idolized. I play basketball, so somebody that I tried to pattern my game at. And
even beyond that, just the sheer level of drive and ambition. So you think somebody at that age that's
41.
going into their second act is there? I mean, he wasn't done living.
No, and
so you
there
don't
was
expect it.
There was no illness. There was no foul play. So it's just how did he? I feel like he was just definitely taken from us too soon, and it made me go back into the mindset of when we lost soldiers.
Yeah, you that's one of the first things you said. You said, I feel like this is what it felt like when we lost a soldier.
That haze that just came over everything. It was we lost one of the people from our ranks, and it's unexplainable. And so I was talking to the rest of the band and explaining to them Kobe passed, and they're looking at me like, what? None of us could believe it. And I was like, no, he died.
You sent me a text message. I was in the congregation.
Yeah.
And I mean, my face just dropped and I was like, what? And the first thing I did was go to Google.
Right.
And there it was everywhere. And
I mean, honestly,
just like, wow.
We were in church, and I was like, I know you didn't know about it, so I was like, let me go ahead and just let you know that like Kobe passed, like he died, and the biggest thing that I was afraid of after we got out of church and we talked about it, we were listening on the radio. I said, I hope that Gigi is not.
Yeah, it's the first
with
thing you
him.
said.
And I was like, they literally go everywhere.
Yeah.
And when we heard that Gigi was on, that's the part that made me break.
Yeah.
I wasn't okay, but I was okay, you know, with Kobe passing. I was like, it sucks, you know. But when I heard that Gigi was on the airplane, on the helicopter, that took me to another place.
And then and all the other people, but
of course,
there was 3 children.
Yeah.
That were, you know, taken.
So
it's so sad.
Yeah. So this was like one of the topics that we felt like you suggested, like, this is something that I feel we need to talk about.
We were going to do a grief episode anyway. Yeah.
But it just got pushed to the front of the list because of this.
Yeah.
So it was a subject that I know for me, I've handled grief, like I said, in the past differently than I do now. I still have moments where I'm able to kind of flip a switch, but I feel a lot more than I used to feel back in that time.
Yeah.
Because when you're a soldier, you definitely have to be in a certain mindset in order to carry out the missions that you have to carry out. Now that I'm not a soldier, my mindset and my approach and my mannerisms and the things that I think about how I approach life are completely different. There are elements in there, but it's not like how it used to be. Mm-hmm. So, in talking about grief and how, you know, you deal with grief, these were some of the things that I wrote down while I was like doing some research and while I was coming up with some notes. I wrote this down, and I said, in my honest opinion, I don't feel like there's a right or wrong way to grieve.
Right.
That was one of the things that I had to really identify.
Every trauma counselor, therapist will tell you that everyone grieves in their own way, and there's no wrong way unless you're doing something to harm yourself or others.
In the past, I used to feel I was very judgmental of how people grieved, because as a soldier, you're taught, you know, you want to honor that person, but you can't, like, the emotional state, you can't live in it. So when I saw other people living in it, I was just like, what's wrong with them? Like, listen, I know it sucks, but like we gotta keep pushing. So I was very judgmental. So which
is interesting because just some of my backstory. My brother was murdered in 2006, and he was 19 years old, and it was a very traumatic event. I mean, he was stabbed to death and he died, and I didn't get to say goodbye and all of that. And it's something that, I mean, there's so much that we could talk about regarding that situation, but grief came in so many different ways for me. In the beginning, I was really strong and like in control, and like, I don't know where that came from.
Maybe you needed to be strong, you felt like, for your parents.
Potentially, yeah. Probably. But then, and for his friends too, actually, for his friends too. And, but then it came out in different ways. Like, I locked myself away in my dad's house one day while he was out of town for like a couple days. I just kind of disappeared and I let it out a little, you know, by myself.
Yeah.
But grief, I read that grief is it feels like fear. And I can really identify with that because when I was grieving my brother, I remember actually being afraid of being in elevators in my apartment building, in an elevator in my apartment building, if a young man would walk onto the elevator with me. If
was
I was
it
alone.
Because it was a young man? Or?
Yeah, because I didn't know the person that took my brother's life. I knew he was a young man, and I didn't know who he was.
So you just assumed that it could be a threat. And I was like,
it could be anybody. It could be this guy that's in this elevator with me right now.
Understood.
And so I started getting a little bit paranoid about that.
That could be very traumatic.
It was. And so it's one of the reasons I left the city, because I didn't want to live in that headspace.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
Never knew that. I mean, I deal with PTSD, as you already know. I don't like when people walk behind me.
Yeah.
Like that. Like,
I don't even think about it's very interesting how it comes out with you. And again, we're going to go really into it in an episode. But I mean, just the other day we were walking where? Like at my job, which is in a secure place with a lot of security. And someone was walking behind us and you stopped and stepped aside and let that person walk ahead of us because you just could not handle
I
them
couldn't
walking
handle
behind
it.
us.
So, I mean, hearing you say that, after your brother passed and the way that, part of the mechanism of when you were grieving was every time that, you were on an elevator and a young man walked on, it was just like you got fearful.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. There's something that I never knew. Like you just shared that with me for the first time. So,
yeah.
Are you affected now by that?
No, I'm not. I mean, maybe because I left. And so maybe that was one of my ways of coping because I knew because I left and that person couldn't possibly be there. I mean, sometimes I get a little nervous.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's a good question.
I mean, just reason why I'm asking, one, so I can be aware and pay attention, but two, just, maybe that might be something to bring up even in therapy to be like, to talk about, to dive deep into. I would say also for those that are watching this episode or that are listening, it's important if you find yourself in a place where you feel like you need help to go to a therapist and talk about, like a grief counselor,
Yeah, I didn't want to do that. Like when my brother died, I was like, no, like I think I talked to someone once and then I was like, I'm not doing this. So it wasn't until years and years later and a lot of things happening in my life that I started to actually see a therapist. And funny enough, like we've talked about a lot of stuff, but we haven't actually talked about my brother's death yet.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I should probably bring it up and we should probably talk about it because it doesn't just go away. Now, another way that I dealt with the grief of my brother's death, I felt a lot of guilt when he died, thinking that like maybe I wasn't crying enough. And I was very sad and I would cry, but then my body would just stop crying. And I'd be like, but I'm not done crying. And I felt like I wasn't done crying, but I couldn't produce the tears. And then I felt guilty that like I should be crying. And it was this weird thing. And then it was like, okay, I need to live my life for the life that he can't live.
Right.
And I remember having an especially hard time. He died in May of 2006. And when on New Year's Eve, when the clock struck 12 into the
following
first
year,
that I kind of lost it because I was like, oh my God, I'm going into a whole new year without this person.
Interesting.
That means a whole new year of birthday, a whole new year of Christmas, a whole new year of everything that person will never experience. And that really hurt me. And then it was like this obligatory, like, every year on the anniversary of his death, I need to be sad and cry.
Yeah, so let's revisit that. So when we first started dating, our birthdays, my birthday and Misha, your brother's birthday, are 3 days apart.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand because we never, I mean, not that, when you're starting to date, like you say like, well, listen, on September such and such, I'm going to cry, I'm going to feel sad. So, just as a heads up, we never entertained that conversation. So I'm like, okay, we're celebrating my birthday and I'm all excited, and then a couple of days later, I'm just like, this whole like wave of sadness came over you. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, I mean, it was so foreign to me. And you were like, you didn't really explain. You had this cloud. I'm like, why is she so sad? Why is she like, it's just so weird. I'm like, it's my birthday. Like, what are you doing? And because I didn't understand that, this was your brother's birthday, I almost felt like you were taking away from my moment.
Which, funny enough, I feel the same way when it's my birthday because literally the day after my birthday is your anniversary for moving to LA. So it's like my birthday and then I've been here for whatever.
But so I don't go in. Like I did one time. That was it. But I mean,
Yeah, but
I mean,
I can understand how.
So I
But
not knowing.
what I do love though about our relationship is the first year that we were dating, we did talk about it to some capacity because you said, "Well, how about this year we do something to honor him?"
Yeah, because I saw how sad you were.
Yeah,
And
and
so
so we went. You went. Well, we went together, but you suggested we went and got bubbles with a wand, and then we went over to Santa Monica Pier and we blew bubbles on the pier, and it was just like this really nice thing to do.
yeah, I know that one of the ways that we'll get into a little bit, but actually we can get into it now. How you deal with grief is to celebrate.
Yeah.
And I knew that it was important for us to do something to where like it. I wanted to reshape the narrative. I know you have been sad for so many years, and why do we choose on this particular day instead of honoring him in such a positive way and celebrating? You want to like kind of go back into this place of grief and like reliving it all.
Yeah,
again. And I didn't want you to have that. I didn't want you to wear that weight. I know that takes a lot out of any person, but specifically,
it's hard. It's a hard thing.
I saw how you were dealing with it.
Adjust to celebration because you don't want to celebrate because you're sad because this person is missing out on, you getting married. My brother will never be married. He will never have children. He never experienced seeing me become married or,
I mean, I understand that. So this is how I look at it. You have choices. And again, there's no right or wrong way to grieve. I choose to rather celebrate the life and not focus on what they did not do, because that's only going to, I feel, in my opinion, add more weight on the guilt.
And I understand that. And that's a great way to look at it. It's just really hard to get there when it's a 19-year-old. When it's a child like Gianna, 14 years old. I can
find things about Gianna and celebrate the fact that she found her passion at a young age.
Right. Now, if you were to talk about my brother did not find his passion at a young age.
I didn't know your brother.
I know.
So if I had known Misha, I probably would have found something to where, you know what, like, even if he didn't find his passion, I'm going to live out his honor in some kind of way, like on his death or his birthday, whatever it is. Like I said, doing the bubbles, releasing balloons, or he liked hockey, or he liked whatever it was. I'm going to find a way to, you know what, why don't I start a foundation or a charity to give in his honor? Yeah. There's ways to do it.
One year made me feel really a lot better about that day. I was at a previous job, and it was a volunteer day, and we were making these containers with toys for children in the hospital that were dealing with cancer treatments. And so I was like, wow, this is a really great way to honor my brother by doing something for these children that, are still here,
that's
may be gone soon, Right. So I think doing things that helps a lot.
Right.
But it is still hard when you're like, man, he was 19 and then he died in 2006. So we're now, like, what is that, 14 years? It's hard for me to remember a lot. Like the memory fades of like his voice, his laugh, I remember some of it, but it fades.
But so what you have to, in my opinion, what you have to be careful of is not to allow yourself to feel guilty because whatever.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, do you not have like old videos of him somewhere? I would go find, so if that's the case, go find old videos. Go look at old pictures if you want to remember. But the things that, like maybe his voice, all of those things, in my opinion, don't focus in on that. Focus on like the memories of like, we did this together. I remember that one time when we went and got ice cream together. You tell me different stories about how he was saying your grandpa's name.
Yeah.
He said bumpaboo. Like various things like that. Like let that be the joy of what you do.
Yeah, and I think that you've helped me a lot to cope with the grief of losing him.
The reason why I say a lot of these things, being in the military, one of my deployments, I had I think there was 4 of us in the room, 4 NCOs in the room. NCOs, for those that may not know about military lingo, non-commissioned officer. So that's what NCO stands for. So there were 4 of us in the room. This, I believe, was my second deployment to Iraq, and only 2 of us came back. The first 2 had some, horrific deaths that they had to experience. So I had no choice. Number one, when you're in leadership and you have 30 guys that you have to lead into combat and on a day-to-day basis, and you have to try to find motivation, even when you're not motivated yourself and you're dealing with all of these emotional things, you have to find a way. Not even going to lie to you. I was super scared because every time I thought we went out the gate, I just had a new son. I felt like, God, I don't want to die, but how do I motivate everybody else when I'm scared? So I had to find ways in order to motivate the troops, to even cope with the deaths that from the roommates that I had. There were 4 of us in the room, only 2 of us made it back, of understanding like, I'm going to, as motivating the guys, tell everybody these were the great memories that we had with these people, not to put our attention on the wrong things. Let's go out and let's do all of these missions in their honor. Let's execute in their honor. And I found that to be more of a driving force than the opposite of kind of sitting into a place where you can almost find yourself getting into a depressive mindset. Out there, you have no choice. You can't be depressed. You can, you can do anything you want to do. But the choices of if you were in a depressed state, a lot of times your life would be affected or other soldiers around you because you wouldn't be at your best.
Yeah.
So I was like, let's find a way to celebrate their lives. If that means, we get back or you go on leave or R&R, you get a tattoo to remember them, get a tattoo to honor them. Or we bind together as brothers. Let's pull together as a brotherhood. I kind of like what the city's doing right now for Kobe and Gianna and those others that were on the helicopter. Like we went down there, like we saw the memorial, and it's just like the city is binding together. The world is binding together.
Yeah.
And I feel like that love and the choice to celebrate their lives is more beneficial. Even how we've seen Vanessa and just how resilient she's displayed. Though, like I feel like she's made a choice.
I'm so impressed.
She's made a choice.
Like with the statements or posts that she's posted, I thought, it's evident that she has some strong support.
Of course.
And that she's a strong individual, even if she's faking it to get through it right now.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you just have to get through it, and you have to push yourself or fake it till you make it, kind of, you know. And I'm just highly impressed with her. But when my brother died, a lot of people were saying to me like, I don't know how you're so strong, and like, how do you? And I'm like, well, you really don't have a choice, because you wake up. You do have a choice. No, but you wake up, like, you are not in control of whether or not you wake up and breathe the next day. So if you wake up the next day and you're breathing, you are carrying on in a sense. And I'm not saying moving on, but you're still living, and you're not dying. True,
but I'm saying, like, your strength is a choice. Like, as we know, there are some people, like we've said before, who operate in a depressive state. Like they choose, not that they choose, in the lack of better words, they are making a choice. And sometimes with that sadness, that grief overwhelms them, and they choose to be saddened and almost like operate in a depressive state. Your choice to be strong, like you identify, listen, I'm alive, I'm breathing, I'm going to do something with purpose. You're choosing to do that.
Well, and you have to think, like, how does it honor the person that died if you, like, lay in bed all day and don't live?
Even with Kobe, like, everyone is talking about the Mamba mentality, how he operated, how he was.
Or hashtag girl dad.
Yeah, even seeing that, like, so many guys are posting pictures with their daughters and saying hashtag girl dad. He inspired, he made an impact, and those people are living out, in their purpose in order to honor him in their daily lives.
Yeah.
Choosing to, like, exhibit the Mamba mentality, choosing to be proud that they are a girl dad. One of the things that while I was doing some research, on grieving was that even though we grieve differently, we have to learn to respect.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I've learned even in our marriage. I didn't necessarily all the time, like I told you before, I was very judgmental of understanding how to be respectful. Just because you grieve differently doesn't mean that you have to pass judgment or feel a certain kind of way about it.
Or it doesn't even mean that I'm weak or you're weak.
Right.
You know?
Or that I don't have the necessary emotional capacity that you do. That doesn't mean that I'm not sincere or it doesn't affect me just because, again, I choose to do it in this particular manner. That's one of the things that I know sometimes was a very sensitive area for both of us. You would probably think that like, oh, you're not exhibiting any emotion, so you really don't care. And I would think that, oh, she's just crying too much. Oh, she's weak. And that was not the case. So like having an understanding and, evolving in my mindset and realizing that, that's one of the ways that you should not operate. You should not pass judgment in how people grieve. Some people are going to be saddened and may go into a depressive state. If you want to try to encourage them and let them know that they have support.
Yeah. I read something that really hit home because a lot of people don't know how to, especially if they've never experienced a loss for themselves, like a major loss, they don't really know how to be there for you. And if this is you and you have someone in your life that has lost someone, one of the best things you could do is just listen. You don't have to have any answers. Grief is invisible. It's something you cannot fix.
Okay.
We often want to fix things. So it's just not one of the things that we can fix. But if you can just allow people to talk about their loved one and ask them questions about the person, like what did they like? What did they dislike? Just get to know them through the eyes of the person that knew and loved them. It will help that person feel like they're acknowledging the person that they've lost. And it does help. And it makes them feel cared for. And I mean, you don't have to say sorry. You don't have to say anything.
Right.
You can say, I'm here.
True. Another thing that I was looking at was usually in the midst of a tragedy, we always want to know why.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I was reading was it said, don't try to make sense of the situation that you're trying to get through when you're grieving. Because you may not get the answers. And if you don't get the answers, it's going to make you frustrated.
Yeah.
It's like it continued to pile up and pile up. So be mindful that, some things happen in life, especially if you're a believer. We walk by faith and not by sight.
Yeah.
And we don't understand why things happen, but we have to have faith and know that God is going to get us through it. So that was one of the things that I took away from it. That was something that I never thought about was, we always want to try to make sense of it. I know you and I, when we have different things, you'll be like, you always want to know the answer or the reasons why. And there'll be times that, I've even been frustrated with you. I'll be like, I don't have to tell you, like, you just do whatever. And you're like, but why?
Yeah.
So hearing that, it kind of made, sense in the understanding of when you don't get those answers, how frustrated you can become. So just be careful. And then we're always looking for somebody to blame sometimes when a tragedy happens. You have to be careful not to try to blame somebody. That's one of the things that I thought was very insightful. We're always looking for, like, whose fault?
It doesn't help, actually.
Yeah, it doesn't.
In my situation, like with my brother, there is someone to blame because someone killed him. There is someone to blame, but like that person's life is already so messed up.
Right.
And I remember I was in church at the time, not actually at church. It was late at night when I got the call, but I remember being in church one day and it just hit me. Like I heard God say to me, like, what would you do if the person that killed your brother walked into this church right now and accepted Christ?
That's powerful. That's
and
deep.
I was like, I don't want to answer that.
Yeah.
But I had to internally really think about it, what that means.
That's heavy.
It is really heavy. So one thing that I read was that It's you need to distinguish grief from trauma. And if you keep thinking about how somebody passed away, you're not able to move on to the process of grieving them. You're in the trauma phase. And it's important to get out of the trauma phase as quickly as possible so that you can deal with the grief. And the grief is normal and healthy. And don't ever let anybody tell you that it's not okay to grieve. It's absolutely necessary and normal to grieve. But the trauma is what keeps you sort of bonded to the pain of it.
That makes a lot of sense. And hearing you say that, I never thought about associating the trauma. Like, for lack of better words, I mean, that's kind of what we had to do being in the military. You, like I said, finding that switch so the way that you're not, because the trauma can handicap you.
Yeah, like thinking about how my brother died. Like, what were his final thoughts? How was he feeling? Was he feeling alone? Was he in pain? Was he scared? Those thoughts, that's trauma.
It can definitely handicap you. There was one of the things that leadership would, convey to us, like our first sergeant or our commander would be like, all NCOs, especially after we had a tragedy, somebody lost their lives or killed in action or whatever the case was, or badly injured. Yeah. We had to do a lot of damage control psychologically for the soldiers, so that way they would not be afraid to go out the gate to do patrols or to do missions or to conduct raids, because that trauma could definitely handicap you and enable you so that you don't feel like you can do your job that you've been training for. So that's something that I never really thought of. It was just something we kind of did inadvertently, not knowing what we were doing. We were just knowing, like, you have to, mentally talk to the soldiers, get them in a place so they can go out there and do their jobs. Something else that I did a little research on, and is talking about the sadness. Sadness validates the value of what you lost. So it's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry. It's okay. That means that person that you lost meant a lot to you. Yeah. So, there's so many different ways to grieve, but people talk about, like, I'm just sad, I just can't get past it. It's because that person that you were connected to was very real. And just because you don't cry, everybody handles their grief in a different way. Yeah.
And kind of back to what I was saying about the trauma aspect, when I was thinking about my brother and like what he was feeling and what he experienced in that moment, I had to also then, in order to get out of the trauma of that, I had to say to myself, well, you know what? He's not in that anymore. He's not in the trauma anymore. He's literally passed on.
Right.
So he went through that trauma phase and he's gone, and now he's no longer in trauma. Meanwhile, I'm stuck in trauma thinking about his trauma that he left behind. Right. So I can take that as an example to leave it behind as well and not worry that he's still being traumatized by it.
Right. I think there are a lot of times that you need the support of other people. Sometimes, like you were saying before, just listening. But if you happen to be a person that's called upon to listen and to be there, while you listen, you want to encourage. You don't want to push the person to be like, get past it. I know you were saying before, somebody, a friend was telling you to get over it.
Someone literally told me, get over it.
And that's not the language that you want to use.
Never tell someone to get over it.
That's not the language you want to use. I know that we were talking about getting through it. And I forget what else we were.
I have a couple things. So, like, if you're really struggling and you cannot seem to move forward, you can consider giving yourself a grieving day. So that's an option.
Okay.
Also, have some things to look forward to. What do you have mean? A future ahead of you. I mean, something you're planning toward.
Okay.
That is not related to the death of that person.
Right.
Another thing, though, in relation to death and what you have to do afterward, one of the most frustrating things to do after you've lost someone is to go through the process of picking out their casket, their burial plot, their everything that you have to do to plan a funeral and to lay that person to rest, because you don't want to be focused on that stuff. You just want to sit and cry. But the fact of the matter is, there is a business of dying.
Right.
And you have to deal with the business. aspect. And even though you don't want to, for some reason, that part kind of forces you to keep living.
Yeah, you have like life does not stop for you.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that you have to consider. That's why I choose to try to celebrate because life continues, like it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
So you can honor this person. It could be, with a tattoo, or it could be a charity or a function, or like you were saying before, you were giving gifts to the kids that may have had like illnesses at the hospital.
Yeah.
Like I would highly suggest when you're going through the grieving process, you're going to experience a lot of different emotions. But once you get to a place that you are kind of able to breathe again, find a way to celebrate that person.
Yeah.
That's a great way to honor them so you can keep their memory. And there are certain things that you want to focus on. Like I know you were just saying like you don't remember the texture of their voice or various aspects. If you have, like I said, recordings or whatever, you can watch them. Or you can just choose to remember like the memories that you do have in your mind. Focus on those as like those were some great times. Like my father, like I don't remember his sound of his voice, but I remember some of the stuff that he would say. I just remember a lot of the funny stories, us going fishing. I remember like the highlights, so it's just like when you think about a highlight reel, you don't remember like all of the scores, all the points. You just know that, they had a great game. He had a triple double. You can't tell like, well, he had 22 points and 11 rebounds. You don't remember all the statistics, but the overall view of what happened, you remember those things.
Right. Grief makes a lot of other people uncomfortable. Like watching you grieve.
Yeah.
Can make other people uncomfortable. But you know what? It's a process that you have to go through. And I hope that we've given you a way to sort of detach yourself from the trauma.
Right.
And deal with the actual grief.
And when you see others grieve, like don't be judgmental. Everybody handles grief in a different way. Try to be supportive. Try to lend a listening ear. They may be there just to listen. And if you happen to be in the vicinity of having a listening ear, offer some encouragement. Words like get over it, to choose not to use those words, or get past it. You may want to offer them like a way to suggest it, to celebrate it. So,
yeah. Well, I think that is sort of where we'll leave this one, but we wanted to just dedicate this episode to Kobe and Gianna Bryant, to John Altobelli, his wife Kerry Altobelli, and their daughter Alyssa Altobelli, Christina Mauser, Sarah Chester, her daughter Peyton Chester, and the pilot Ara Zobayan, for all of the losses.
Yeah.
And for anyone in your life that you may have lost, for my brother, for your soldiers,
my father,
for your father, of course. And again, any of you who have ever lost anyone, or for those of you who will, because we all will. It's part of the process of life. When. Yeah, yes, it's not if, it's when. Thank you so much for joining us on Shades of You podcast. We hope you tune into the next episode. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, everywhere. We're on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, at Shades of You, at Shades of You podcast on Instagram and Facebook.
Thank you so much. We just want to send out this love and saying that it's going to be all right. It's going to be okay.
Have a good one.